I have the pleasure of introducing Lars today. He restores cards and knows all of the things about Azure, and that's exactly what he's going to talk to us about.
Hello, my name's Lars. I work for Pluralsight that gives me shoes. Look at them. I know. I'm an Azure MVP, which means I talk a lot about Azure, and then Microsoft comes around and they give you stickers and say, good job. But it's a community award, in case you're not familiar with the MVP program. And I usually plug my YouTube channel because it's hilarious and has nothing to do with Azure. So if you want to follow me there, I guess. But all goes not wrong. I do actually live in Whoop Whoop. Here's a picture of my yard. There you go, actually video, to be honest. Yes, I do live there. I'm behind the camera, not exactly there. But yeah, I live in country Victoria. And it's interesting because when we moved about 8.5 years ago, people thought we were absolute idiots, like complete bonkers, because there was no internet connection, there was no mobile connection, and I'm a software developer. I work in IT. Yay, right? And then we made that work, and then in about, let's say about April of 2020, instant geniuses. Like, we were just the cleverest people that ever lived. So it's funny how things change with perspective, eh? But no, I do have llamas. This is a little bit old, that video, but they do live where we are. They're neighbors' llamas, they're not mine, because I'm not a farmer. I'm a software developer. So we find out ways, right? We problem solve. That's what we do. So today, actually, I'll start with this. I'm writing a book on Azure. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm a complete idiot for doing it, because my God, you spend a lot of time on it. There's no weekends anymore. There's lots of yelling because I'm always sitting at a computer. But I'm writing it, and I'm sort of a bit more than halfway through, but it's in meat, which means it's early access program. And throughout the talk, if you have good questions or something, you might be able to win a copy. See, bribery, I hope it works. So what is the plan? Because I don't know if you read the abstract or read anything about the talk on the agenda, or you just happen to go in here because you thought it was someone else. I'll take it, doesn't matter. But the plan is to talk a whole lot about Azure, right? But that can get kind of boring, maybe, because it's like, where do you start? So I'm going to rely on you. And this picture is also AI generated. It's funny because Mish was just talking about it. All the images in my presentation today is generated by AI. This one, I said, give me an audience that's looking at a screen that says programmable or something like that. Anyway, that was the best one. Not sure exactly, but there we go. So that's the plan. I do want your input, and it'll become obvious how, but you might want to do more than that. So we are going to be looking at the Azure portal, which is, if you do AWS, it's like the AWS console, because it's much easier to explain things than going through 16,000 lines of CLI, right, of batch commands. So we are going to use that, but everything I do today can also be done in a CLI or a PowerShell or an SDK or whatever your tool of choice is, right? So just bear that in mind. But I'm not going to touch that because we only have 50 minutes, and I have an awful lot of stuff to go through. So here's the story that you're going to be involved in. It's the kingdom of the bright blue cloud. Oh, come on, it's Azure, right? Anyway, they're in trouble. So dragons are attacking from all sides, and they need your expert help desperately. Yes, I did write that bit. That wasn't ChatGPT, obviously. And your input is going to be, well, they do need your help, right? So this is do you remember the old Choose Your Own Adventure books? Did anyone ever read those? I'm not going to have to look at you. There was a few people that are really old. Okay, cool. I did too, right? And you go through and read the story and go, do you want to go left or right, go to this page or that page? That's the idea I wanted to do as a presentation. So there's many opportunities for things to go very wrong and explode in a ball of fire. But we'll get there. Okay, so that website, cyoca.azurewebsites.net, bring it up on your device. You can also scan that QR code. That's probably easier. And you should see a very simple prompt or page that says something to the effect of voting hasn't started or something. All right. So if you don't do that, you're going to miss out. All right. So does anyone not get this, or do we want the website again? So CYOCA, choose your own cloud adventure.azurewebsites.net. All right, cool. And the whole point of this is I like my presentations are like a conversation, right? So I really like your questions. And I have hats, actual hats. So if you ask questions and they're not silly questions, or maybe if they're silly, look, Azure hats. See, bribery again. Now, seriously, if you ask questions, it becomes more of a conversation, which means you listen better and you learn more, right? So by all means, put your hand up, yell out, whatever, I'm fine with it. It just happens I have a microphone, but don't let that scare you. Okay, so we're going to start with the foundations of the cloud castle. And bear in mind that some of the analogies is going to be a little bit strained, but it's fine, right? So yes, that's also made by AI, because you can do pixel art. So yeah, it's kind of fun. If you haven't tried it, like Mish said, it's actually kind of Midjourney, DALL-E, all those, they're interesting tools. Just don't put words in them, as we saw. So the foundation of this is the app service. Now, who here has actually used Azure in any capacity whatsoever? About half. Okay, so the rest is, I'm guessing, another cloud, or does anyone not use cloud technology at all? All right, cool. So all of this will make somewhat sense. So you're going to try and maybe mentally map the Azure terms to your AWS or GCP or Oracle cloud. Anyone? No, I didn't think so. So we're going to talk about app service, right? And an app service is a platform as a service, which is probably my favorite kind of service. I am a developer, I am not infrastructure, so I'm kind of shying away from the IaaS stuff, the infrastructure as a service. But an app service is a platform as a service. You can host basically a website, right, which is most of the internet, well, all of it almost, right? Or an API, or you can put containers on it. This is by far the majority of Azure services are hosted on app service, so that's why we're starting there. And it's fully managed, which means you don't have to do any of the infrastructure, or you don't have to clean up stuff, and like Azure does everything for you. You just have to worry about putting your code there, and it'll run, right? Unless it's buggy, but anyway. Okay, yeah, it can be cost effective, or not, and we'll hopefully get a bit more into that. So, here comes the interesting part where I flip between screens. Give it a sec. No? Okay. That's good. Do you like that blue screen? It's good, isn't it? That's Azure. It's like like blue screen of death, exactly. All right. Hey, duplicate. Right, so we're here. You can see that. Is that big enough? Yeah, it should be good. All right, cool. So this is the Azure portal. This is what it looks like when you log in. If you've never seen that before, this is like your home page, right? And it shows you, resources, whatever. You can see I have a programmable RG resource group. That's one of the fundamental things about Azure. Everything must live inside a resource group, which is like a logical container. But I'm going to first just show you here. We go up here. There's a menu. There's many ways of finding the right service. In this case, I have a shortcut to app services. So it'll show me all of my current app services. And there's a few. And I can create a new one. I'm only going to sort of go through this a little bit slow the first time, okay? And this is the experience in Azure. If you create anything in the portal, you go through this wizard experience, which you'll only ever do once when you're learning, and then you'll use the CLI or PowerShell or an SDK, right? Because this is slow. But it's a good way of showing how to create things. And you go through all the steps. You put in all the various things. Where do you want to locate it? What do you want to name it? What kind of plan do you want to run it on? So there's an app service plan, which is probably the key to some of these. Well, so I'm not going to create one because we only have so much time, right? So I've created Programmable. And again, this is what it looks like in Azure. So here is an app service. I can put some code on it. I can put my API. I can do various things, well, many things with this particular app service. Now, an app service always lives on an app service plan. Thank you, Microsoft, for this great naming. An app service lives on an app service plan. An app service plan is essentially a VM. There's not much difference. So if you go to the menu that is here, and you find, whoops, not that, nope. And we find app service plan somewhere, there it is. You can click on that, and it'll actually go to the app service plan that this is running on. And then you get stats, like CPU, etc. It is just a VM. Right, so when you see app service plan on Azure, think VM, but it's managed. So you don't have to worry about OS updates and all that sort of stuff. And you can get all your stats from that if that's your thing, but you can also upscale it, downscale it, you can have more instances, etc. It has all of those capabilities. Okay, I just want to show you one thing here before we get into what the next steps will be. And again, please ask questions, because this is going to go pretty quick, right? Was that? No? I can't see you very well, so okay. Just shout out, go stop, or something to that effect. So in here, the one thing as developers, because I'm a software developer, there's something here called advanced tools. Ooh, and as a developer, I'm like, ooh, I'm going to click that, right? That's what that's what we do. Advanced tools opens a new window or a new tab. It's also called kudu, after the antelope in Africa. And this gives you sort of like more things about the VM and the back end of things. And this is often forgotten, but you have even a debug console for that machine. You can give command or PowerShell here, right? And I show you this because it's one of the most important things as a developer in the cloud, is that you have access to more than just basically the code running. You want to see what's happening. And this will give you that. It's also where you get the SSL certificate, which we may or may not get into, depending on what you vote on. There's a whole lot of features in kudu, or advanced tools. I don't know what's advanced, that you want to go. It's more like developer tools, right? Okay. Questions on that? Because that's just a really quick introduction to app services. Someone's got to be first. No? Jeez, people, so quiet. I have hats. Did I mention? I've got hats. See, Phil wants a hat, I can tell. Phil's up next, by the way. So he's definitely not working on his presentation right now. All right, so if you want to go to your device, and now you're going to decide which way we go next. All right? So you should see two choices. There's the storage, which is protect the treasury, or we can talk about CI/CD, which is keep building those walls. All right, so I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to press a button. Should be simple, I hope. And I'm not showing you the count because then you see the URL, then you can change it. But anyway, I know. Okay, oh, we have a clear winner here, I think. Say again? Question, yes?
Could we get a link up there one more time?
Oh, the link. So choose your own cloud adventure, CYOCA, yeah, .azurewebsites.net, which is the default app service address that you get. So whatever your name of your app service is, .azurewebsites.net.
Choose your own adventure? Was it?
Choose your own cloud adventure. Because trademark. I know. All right, I think, did you get a chance to vote?
Choose your own cloud adventure.azure.net?
Azure websites, in one word, .net. I know. That's why I use the QR code, because URLs are terrible. Like humans, we don't work with URLs. All right, I'm going to let you vote, but there's a clear winner with 25-8, and it's CI/CD. So keep building those walls. And that means I have to get the other slide deck here. Okay, all right. So, it's in Slide Master. There we go. Cool. So, monitor the armory. Oh, hang on. That was the wrong one. What did I click on? I'm sorry. I did tell you this might blow up. There's so many moving parts. CI/CD. There we go. Okay. So, let's try again. And there's not many slides. Like, we want to look at the Azure part of it. So, okay, CI/CD. I'm assuming you know what it means. Continuous integration, continuous deployment? No? Okay, wrong assumption. You're shaking your head? Okay, cool. So I'll talk to you. It's a very common thing in software development, in particular, is this idea of you. Actually, I'll get to that in the next slide. Let me just continue the story. The constant attacks means that we need more walls, right? We need a fast way to rebuild them, hence CI/CD. But we also need to make sure that we improve on the walls when they're built. Like we improve the code, hence that's part of the continuous integration part, right? And they want to build walls fast. Again, it's got to be fast. So continuous integration or deployment. Now, continuous integration hopefully is used in every single software shop ever, at least now. I know it's not, but it's one of those benchmarks that you really want to have continuous integration, right? So it means that every time you check in code, being to a source control of some sort, usually something like GitHub or Git locally, then that code gets picked up on some integration server. Could be one of many, there's many products. And then that gets built, the code gets built, and if there's any errors, it spits it out straight away, and won't even integrate it, right? So that's the continuous integration. The continuous deployment part is that you do this in production, right? The famous example is, I think it was Flickr, that he was using continuous deployment. They deployed every 15 minutes. There's new code going out in production, every 15 minutes, right? Which is a bit excessive maybe, but you can, right? So it does encourage efficient testing, hopefully, because your code, when it breaks, well, there's going to be bells and alerts and stuff, and it won't integrate. And I'm sure there's some metric somewhere, and manager goes, oh, look at that red graph, right? So it sort of encourages good testing, which we want anyway. So who here tests their code all the time? Okay, liar, liar, liar. Right? It's tricky, I know, it's tricky. And that green light when it passes, because you commented out the code, it still counts, right? Yeah, I know the feeling. But no, we should be testing code. And it's, again, it's a benchmark you want to achieve. Responsive development, because you are actually considering what you put into this system. Monitoring, there's a lot of stats that come out of it, like I mentioned just before. Happier clients, because things usually don't break, right? And if you have something like a showcase environment that they always have access to, you can push stuff to it. So it does work in many, many ways, not just for copy. And then using GitHub in Azure. So this is what I'm going to do, and this is where it gets a bit contentious, I guess, sometimes. So let's look at CI/CD. Okay. I'm going to go back to the app service, which is here. And, okay, let me just make sure I got my notes. There's so much. I'm going to make sure I tell you everything. First of all, I want to talk about deployment slots. Has anyone here used deployment slots? Yeah, there's always like 3 people. 3, yeah, exactly. And it's one of the most useful tools for Azure App Services, in my opinion. Obviously, this is all my opinion. And deployment slots is a way of having copies of the same environment exactly for different code bases, right? So I can create a deployment slot in here very easily. I can add a slot, and I can call it something like staging. And I'm aware this is a bit small, but that's about as big as it can. Oh, you can probably see it. If I could spell staging. And you see down here, it gets the URL programmable -staging. So the name of the app service dash whatever you call the slot .azurewebsites.net. So fully qualified domain name, right? There's a hint. And then you can choose where to clone the settings from. So you can have, I don't want to clone the settings in case you have different database connection strings, or you have whatever it might be that is different from this for this particular environment or slot. But I'm just going to copy what I have. And it takes a second, usually. Sometimes it takes longer. And what this does is that behind the scenes, it creates an exact copy of that app service we just made on the same app service plan, on the same VM. So it's not going to cost you any extra, right? Because you just pay for the service plan. You don't pay for the app service. You pay for the app service plan. And you have an exact copy of your code in this case. And it's a fully qualified domain name, and it's a deployment target, right? So you see where I'm going with this. There we go. That's finished. So now I have 2 deployment slots, and I can target either in my continuous integration. So when I want, and you can have more than 1 deployment slot, obviously, more than 2, and you can have as many as you want. You get to 10, it gets interesting. But you can have your deployment from your continuous integration going directly into the staging slot, or whatever you want to call it, right? And then you test that. And you can make it publicly accessible. It doesn't have to be, but it has a domain name. And then you can test that till you're happy with it, and then to put it into production, and again, you can do this automated as well. You don't have to go and click buttons in the portal. You just click swap. And you swap the 2 slots. And then again, Azure is very clever, and it goes, oh, okay, well, now the domain for this app service is now the other slot. And it swaps them pretty much immediately. Your customers or your users will never know. And does that sound useful? The people that have never used, like 99% of you? It's very cool. It's super easy to use. It's very difficult to get in trouble, although you can, and I'll show you how I got in trouble. So you don't do it. And it's free. Runs on the same machine. So you don't pay any extra for it. Is there a...
Can you override specific settings?
Yes. Absolutely. You can do that in the actual config of the project. Yeah. But they each have their own Azure-specific configs as well. So if I just close that without swapping it, I can go, if I click on this, it'll go to that instance in the Azure portal, which looks the same, obviously, but it is the other one. And you can go into the configuration here, and that'll have the other settings. And they follow the slot, by the way. So when you swap them, right? Now, how you can, well, there's one really cool thing. Again, of the people that use deployment slots, it's like 99% of people have never done this with them. Are you familiar with A/B testing? Yeah? People nodding? Basically, oh, I've got two of the same pages. If I have one blue button and one green button, and which one gets me more sales? Kind of thing, right? Or which one keeps people longer on the page? Or whatever it is you want to test. But it's usually one thing you test. Otherwise, you're not really testing. You just sort of scattergun, right? What you can do here is you can change the traffic amount. So for example, you can put 50, whoops, and see how the other one changes as well? So now 50% of the traffic goes to each slot. That's all you have to do. I mean, you got to click save, but that's it. Now, how I got in trouble with this is that I did this in a presentation with my own website and then forgot. And I had it at like 5% or 10% or something. I said, oh, isn't that clever? And I moved on. And then I had people going, your website doesn't work. And I'll go to it and go, yeah, it works fine. What are you talking about? And other people will go, your website doesn't work. I'm like, test it again. Yeah, it's fine. I'm like, what? And it's because 5% of the traffic went to the slot that didn't work. So yeah, be careful. But it is very, very, very powerful, and it's so easy. And again, you can do all of this through scripts or code or whatever you want, right? Cool. Questions? Who wants a hat? Yes?
Is there any way in the networking stack from the front end to tell which endpoint it's going to?
Is there any way to tell from in the networking stack?
If you do A/B testing, you're looking at the networking stack on your local client. Can you tell where it's going?
If I give you a hat, can I not answer that? Because I don't know. I'm not sure. I would say yes. Do I throw these?
Yeah, go on, throw it.
This is going to be fun, isn't it? And I can't actually see where it lands. I have no idea, no clue. Oh man, that was pathetic. Okay, that's a good question. Like, can you actually tell networking-wise where you're going? I would say yes. I would assume there is some way of knowing. As a software developer, I don't really care. Right? That's why I'm sort of like, oh, I don't know. But no, I would almost bet on that you can. Yeah. There was another question just down here in the front.
Yeah, just had a question in regards to whether or not there's any sort of monitoring or built-in telemetry with this A/B testing, so you can actually work out, well, does my blue button work better than my green button?
There's some telemetry, as in you can tell the traffic and the standard web traffic, how long people stay on the page and that sort of thing. If you need other monitoring, you might have to implement it yourself, I'd say, because it's usually extremely specific what you're trying to test, right? So trying to make a system that does everything is tricky, but there will be some. But it will be not specific to A/B testing. It'll be specific to the slot, if that makes sense. Yeah, cool. All right, I like it. Questions? Oh, you want a hat too? Sure. We're going to just cover everybody in Azure hats. Oh, I hit you before, so if I aim for there. Oh, see? All right, I'm done. Bye. All right, so, okay,
I have one more question.
One more question. All right, yes.
I was wondering if this replaces like the concept of feature flags as such. Like, do you do limited traffic to like a new version? Like, could you send 1% of traffic to? Like, does that help people use this?
Do you replace? I wouldn't replace the feature flag if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Because the beauty of feature flag is that you can have so many.
Yeah.
So you have 20. I'm like, oh, I'm going to try this one. Or I also use a specific feature flags.
Yeah.
Which this doesn't really help with.
All right.
So that's probably, if you have feature flags, excellent. Right. They're probably a better testing tool than this. I hope that answers the questions roughly. Oh, more questions. Look at this.
You do have a very good voice.
I like that. Projection.
It is a bit of a follow-up to the networking question, but I suppose one of the things that would be interesting is it feasible to do it in another zone, another region, so be able to do testing based on another networking segment, even a different country?
You absolutely can do that as well, but you would use something like Azure Front Door to do that instead. You wouldn't go into A/B testing. That's specifically just for the code base. There's no smarts around that as such. Yeah. Next door, front door.
Just when you're selecting the segment of your users that is going to be tested against, is that sample selected randomly, or can you actually put in criteria?
No.
No.
No. Not that I know of. I could be wrong. If anyone want to correct me, by all means, but not that I'm aware of. No. Cool. All right. We have 20. Oh, yeah. We better move on. All right. So I'm going to go here and advance, and you get to vote again. Cool. All right. So now you should have either Azure SQL, or which is monitor the armory, or protect the treasury again, which is storage. I haven't made 16 different modules. I only made 7. So, but yeah, go for it. Ooh, it's close. Your vote may count. All right. Cool. All right. Ooh, that is actually very close. No, we done? I think we're done. Don't know how many people in here. 60, something like that. Anyway, there's still people not voting. Just missing out the fun. So the winner by 19 to 14 is Monitor the Armor, which is Azure SQL. You really don't like storage, do you? Oh well. Again, this is the beauty of it. So, it's the one where I was before. So let's do that one. All right. So this is, okay, does anyone not know what a relational database is? And it's fine if you don't. I'm not trying to make mockery. I'm just asking. Okay, cool, because then we have like a baseline. Excellent. So Monitor the Armory is about Azure SQL as opposed to Microsoft SQL. There's a difference. And there's a problem keeping up with how much is in the armory, right? This kingdom has this problem because Barnstable, that guy, also generated by AI, he's getting old and items are slipping. He can't be bothered anymore. So we need a better way of managing the armory. So we're going to use Azure SQL. So does anyone use Azure SQL first off? Okay, 2 people, 3 people. Again, the same people. Okay, you don't count. If it was all of you, I would have changed what I said. But if it's that many that don't use it, then I'll sort of go through this. So it is a relational database. No surprises there. It's SQL, right? It's just like one of the oldest products that Microsoft has. It's fully managed again, which is different from a SQL Server database on Azure. I think that's what it's called. I get the naming wrong all the time because, thank you, Microsoft. But there is also a product on Azure which is where you manage the SQL Server, right? This is not it. This is managed databases for you. You still have a server though, but it's like the next level. It's platform as a service. And it allows you to do scaling automatically, like any good cloud product should do. That's kind of why we use the cloud most of the time. It has intelligent threat detection, and while that sounds like marketing crap, it's actually very, very, very awesome. I'm going to show you where to enable it, but we don't really have time because it gets really in-depth. Just know it exists, and it's not just marketing crap. And it's technically serverless, if that's your thing. I know. We just ran serverless conf. Was anyone at serverless days in Melbourne? Yeah, I know you were there, Mish. Okay. Oh, interesting. So we don't have any overlap. Even better. Yeah, right. A couple of weeks ago, we'll run again next year. Serverless days, ANZ. Anyway, that was my thing. That was my plug. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the Azure portal because now we're talking about SQL Server. So I'm going to start by pretending to make a SQL Server, but I'm not actually going to do it because it takes a while to spin up. I've already got one here, as you can see. So I'm going to create one because there's quite a few interesting things when you create an Azure SQL instance as compared to a SQL Server. Now, as always, you've got to choose your resource group. This is a bit different. If you're from the AWS world, a resource group is something you can have if you need it. In Azure, you must have a resource group. Everything exists in a resource group. We have to give this database a name, so we can call it whatever we want, Programmable 2. And then we select the server. I've already got one here, so we can just change that. Again, I'm not going to create this necessarily. Now there's this part here, something called SQL Elastic Pool. And I don't know why it's not on by default. I kind of know, but all that word says is that it's elastic in the way that you can have multiple databases on the same server, and they can just switch it off when you're not using the database. So it makes it a tiny bit slower, because they've got to spin it up if it's not running, but it's way more resource useful. Resource, that word, I forgot the word now. You know what I mean. And then you have to configure an actual database. So again, this is what you're paying for, is whatever size database you want. Again, it's just a VM that gets spun up. You can choose some redundancy, which is not interesting, but then they have this. And this is useful because, yeah, right? So they realize that this can get expensive, so they give you that pricing estimate as you're creating the instance. I have not seen this on any other servers on Azure doing this as you go along. So that's useful, because who here has been caught out by cloud pricing? It's like everybody using a cloud, yeah. It gets interesting sometimes. So there are, did I want to talk to me here? No, you can choose whether it's a public or private endpoint, and you can choose to access it only from within Azure, which is usually what you do, because you don't want access, publicly, which I've done so we can see it, but yeah. And then there's connection policy. Again, we get the pricing, because as I choose different things, the pricing might change, right? So I can add the current client IP address, which is for connection. Now, security. This is where that threat detection is as well. Microsoft Defender for SQL. So is anyone here, have we stopped using Windows machines, or is people still using Windows machines? Anyone? Right, the same 3 IT pro guys. Good. Microsoft Defender is what I've always heard for Windows machines, right? And now there's Microsoft Defender for SQL. And you go, it's not the same product at all. They're completely different. But again, naming. But what this is this intelligent threat protection. And it actually uses what Mish was talking about in AI. It's probably more like machine learning now that I understand the difference. But there's models on how to detect what a threat is for your SQL server. So trends that are out of the norm, and it learns over time. And that's a lot of what the Defender part of it does. And then it has Ledger. Anyone want to hazard a guess at what Ledger is? What is the most overused marketing term in IT in the last 5 years?
Blockchain.
Thank you, blockchain. That's what it is. You get a hat for that. You got one? Again, I can't see. Oh, right. Shush. I got plenty of hats. Yeah, it is. It's blockchain. So what they're saying is that Microsoft Azure, can manage your Azure integrity and logs on the blockchain. So it's like an internal blockchain, right? The idea being is you can't fudge the logs. I'm like, okay. Someone found half of the use case for blockchain? Sure. And again, the pricing is there, etc. And then there is, what is additional setting? Oh yeah, data source. And then this thing here is what I've done. So data source, you can start with none if you just want blank database. You can restore it from a backup, or you can choose sample. And then that will install the good old AdventureWorks database. If you've ever done anything with test data in the Microsoft world, AdventureWorks has been there from like 1992 or something. So it's a very common way, and it's a good way of just having something to look at, which is what I've done. So there's a whole bunch of different things here that I thought was worth mentioning when you create it, but again, I'm not actually going to create it because we don't need another one. So I'm just going to go into the programmable one here. Check my... All right, so this now has some data in it. You can configure access, which I will have to do now, which means who can access it. Obviously, that's very heavily restricted. So it has selected networks, which means from a specific IP address. So it tells me here very conveniently what my current IP address is, because I'm connected to my phone, because I don't trust conference, not Wi-Fi. So I'm going to add that and just save it. And then now I should be able to connect from my machine to this database from the outside, right? It's based on IP, which is pretty secure-ish, right? The additional thing I've done is I authenticate through Azure Active Directory, which is this role-based idea. It's everything goes through Azure Active Directory in terms of permissions. You can also use the good old username password. I wouldn't recommend it because it gets lost, you share it, someone finds it, etc., etc. The Azure Active Directory is much better. So, questions? Because I'm just talking. You've got to interrupt me. It's okay. You're allowed. No? All right, so it all makes perfect sense. Good. Now, there's a bunch of tools that are really useful from the, I guess the Azure, well, it's not the community because it is supported and made by Microsoft, but if you use VS Code, yeah? People use VS Code, I'm assuming. Yeah, exactly, right? So VS Code is a very common developer tool for whatever it is you're doing. It works pretty much with everything. If you look at this, if you're used to VS Code, this looks very similar because it's the same idea. Right? Yes, it works with SQL Service, but it works with all sorts of other things as well. And in here, I can then basically see, so I've connected to it here, to the databases, etc. And it should, hopefully, come on. It's a good tool to use. There's also the good old SQL Server Management Studio, but it's super heavy. It's very large. I find it slow. It says that as that doesn't load. But anyway, what did it do? The connection is what? Broken. Recovery is not. Oh, that went well. See, I told you something can blow up. Okay, see if I can refresh it. Otherwise, we'll just not bother. I may have to log in again, actually. Who knows? But using a tool like this makes it really easy to query your data as well. So just because it's a platform as a service and it's SQL that's managed for you, doesn't mean that there aren't lots of great tools to help you manage it like this. There's also a SQL Explorer in Azure. Shit, don't use it. Okay, maybe this worked this time. No, still doesn't work, sorry. But these are the actual tables, right? I did preload it before we started. And in here is it's relational database. There's not much other magic to do with that. Now, what I did try, just on an aside here now, because we're running out of time. All right, anyway, is that I did get ChatGPT to write me an Azure function that connects directly to this, as in using Azure AD and everything, and it almost worked. So to Mish's point from before, a lot of this stuff, if you're like, oh, I'm stuck, I don't know exactly where to go, you can ask ChatGPT to help you. I still haven't got anything I could use out of the box. I tried it with the Azure CLI, the command line interface, and that was just wrong. It used words that had never been in the syntax, just made it up. So be careful, but it can really help you learn. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say about this. Okay, what time do we end, Olga? How long have I got?
We have got almost 10 minutes, just under.
Okay. All right. No, okay. Any questions about Azure SQL? Otherwise, I'll just keep going. Oh, yes, there's a question. Yes, ma'am.
How does it work if you're wanting to mask PII or limit access to certain data?
Say that again. How does it work if?
If you're wanting to mask PII or you're wanting to limit access to certain entries?
You can do that through policies. I don't have any policies in this presentation, but Azure Policies is usually your friend when it comes to restrictions or specific access.
Does that sort of help limit, mask the data as well, or is it just access?
Not really. Actually, I think there is. Again, this is not my expertise, but I'm pretty sure there's a role which is user something up. You can mark data as, what's it called? What's the word? As, come on. Well, but it's more sensitive. That's what I was looking for. Geez, you're not help. You can mark data as sensitive, and I think that role plays into that role. But again, I need to look that up because I'm not 100% sure. But good question. You want a hat?
Sure.
Yes. You can't tell I'm trying to get rid of them, can you? All right. So, thanks, Olga. Okay. And again, I still want to give 3 copies of my book away as well, where there's a whole bunch more details, obviously. And the best thing is you can heckle me in the book because I'm writing it. And so it's an online version, so you can comment on what I've written and go, you're an idiot. People have done that. Like, what are you on about? I'm like, I don't know. So you can do that. Cool. All right, so we're going to go to level 3, which is the last part of this. And you should see keys to the castle or fairy blessings, which is either Key Vault or Azure Function. All right. Cool. All right, that's pretty obvious. It's like Key Vault, what is even that? I think it's the 3 guys that have used Azure. They go like, yeah, Key Vault's awesome. All right, I think we're going to talk about serverless. Azure Functions. It's almost the same thing. So let me do that. Okay, so Azure Functions is like the darling. Make sure I get it. There it is. It's like the darling of serverless for Azure, right? So, fairy blessings. We have fairies, right? So the kingdom's weapons aren't as strong as they could be. Luckily, there are lots of fairies that know magic. Oh, come on. It's magic. This is like the bulk of my presentation. Took me that long. The fairies need access to the new weapons that are placed in the armory, right? So we're gonna a little bit short on time because I want to do something at the end as well. But an Azure function. Has everyone never heard of an Azure function? Okay, cool. Oh no, again, you're my favorite new person. So Azure function, pretty much the same as a Lambda function on AWS. There's very little difference, and they keep one-upping each other, right? Lambda was first, but then they keep going version. So it's the original serverless on Azure. The main reason people use it is that, well, there's 2 reasons in my book. It's super simple. Right, it's literally a function, just like Lambda, and it's cloud scale. Right, it'll just go on forever. We have infinite resources, essentially. Of course, there are tiers because Microsoft wants to make money out of this. So there's different tiers for different ways of using Azure Functions. There's a premium tier, and there's different ways. It is cheap though, and it can be almost free. So if you sign up, actually I'll show you that in a second. I'll show you a bit about pricing because it can get. There's a really, really good way of setting up functions on Azure that most people don't ever do. Multiple language support, so it doesn't matter if you like C# like me, cool. If you like Python, excellent. Like if you like Java, there's a way to do that. There's almost any language, and if there isn't, you can write your own interpreter for it. Right, but it's super user-friendly, whatever your language is. Okay, so let's look at some functions. Again, ta-da, here. So the way you set up a function is that it must be inside what's called a function app. So app service plan, app service plan, function app. Yeah, I know. It's never been their strong side. It's better than AWS naming though. Elastic Beanstalk, really? So you go and you find a function app, right? And it is just what it says it is. It's literally an app that you host your functions in. So every single function inside this app will be on the same VM or the same type of VM, right? So let's just go through that because this is interesting, I find. Programmable. The reason I put them all in the same resource group here is that then after the talk I can go and delete the whole resource group and it's all gone. So do use resource groups if you start out with Azure. So we're going to call this, should we call it programmable? See if that works. No, see, it doesn't work. Because, why doesn't that work? Because the app service is called programmable, right? So instead, we're going to call this programmable function, maybe. Doesn't really matter what it's called. And then you can choose whether you want to use code, so deploy code to it, or a Docker container. I'm just going to use code. I'm going to go with .NET. Again, here is the first party ones, or whatever you want to call them, the favorite children. And then there's a custom handler for your own interpretation, right? You choose a version .NET, and then we've got to choose a region. Oh, there we go. And, this one's alphabetical. All of these region drop-downs in all the Azure products are made by different people, I think. Because some of them are not alphabetical, some are completely random. I don't get it. So, choose your operating system, Windows. And then here's the plan type. So down here, this is the important bit there, right? There's 3 ways you can host your function, or your function app. First one, serverless. That's what the cool kids do, right? Serverless, yay! Now that's cool because you only pay for what you use, and in fact you get 1 million free executions a month. That's It's a fair amount of testing, right? If you're setting up a function for yourself, use that. Definitely. Yes? 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Woo. Okay. We're going to go over. Then there's the premiums function. That's if you want never to have cold starts. It's the main. There's a few other reasons. But so there will always be at least one VM running your function ready to execute it. Right? So obviously you pay more because there's more resources being used. And then there's the one that no one ever does, except, well, a few people. Okay, I'll try again. Does anyone host or have Azure Functions? No. So you really, okay, right. How do you host it, if I may ask? Do you know?
Yeah, probably.
Say again?
Probably consumption.
Consumption, yeah, which is the common, like the serverless type. Now the cool thing with App Service Plan is that if you already have an App Service Plan, and as we learned at the start, it is the most commonly used service on Azure, maybe apart from VMs, then, well, you'll have an App Service Plan, right? And chances are that that App Service Plan has lots of free resources and time that isn't used to host your website or deliver it, serve it. So you can use it. So in this case, we could choose Programmable Plan, right? And then that's hosted there. And then it's the same price. It doesn't matter if you have 3 million executions a month. It's the same price. And you can do this with quite a few, you can do it with many functions apps, but you can also host multiple app services on the same app service plan. You don't need a separate plan for everything. And this is where that can be cost-effective part comes in. And this, people always go, oh, yeah, I've never done that. And it's extremely beneficial, especially if you want to sell this to your manager. It's free. And they go, oh, sweet, go. Cool. And then we can have the storage, which is just, you need to have a storage account because the code has to live somewhere, so you can just create a new one. And you have networking, which you can enable public access. Maybe you do want to have that, maybe you don't, depending on your use scenario, use case. And then we have monitoring, and again, et cetera, et cetera. These wizards, again, all this is one line of code in the CLI or PowerShell, okay? It's just much simpler, better to show it like this. Application insights, that's a whole talk in itself. I can do an hour on that if you want it. And then, of course, we have deployment, where we get in the code from. So we're back to CI/CD. So we're not doing continuous deployment. Cool. All right. So we review and create that. This should be pretty quick because a function app doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't host anything. It just hosts functions. And we're not going to get to the function because Olga's going to start the music, basically. Okay. So, okay, that's deploying. Do you get the idea, though? Functions live inside a function app. Functions are just code. It's basically like a function you have normally. There's a little bit of a hook to get into it. You can call them from anywhere on the internet if you want, so desire. You can authenticate them. They're quite secure if you set them up correctly. However, I do want to get to the last slides here. And I'm aware I'm talking very fast. Cool. We saved the thing. We did the thing. We did, see? Because it says so. Yeah. All right. I know it's a bit of a challenge, this thing, right? The kingdom's saved, yay! So, you've all done it. Now, I like you, sir. Can you please find me or email me or do something, and I will give you a copy of my book if you don't mind? And also the booming voice. I couldn't ignore that.
Thank you.
And who else wants a book? Yep. There we go. Oh, here. Yep. Just find me because I'll email you the details, right? It's easier. So at Lars Klint on Twitter, if that helps. Cool. And then I have something for all of you, which is I work for Pluralsight, as I said, and they're going to give you all of you free. God, that's hard to say. Free 30-day full access to the platform. So Pluralsight training platform. We have 7,000 different development courses or something. So that gives you a unique link. I think it's 100 activations or something on that link. So share with your friends if you want. But yeah, that's 30 days access to everything. You don't have to put in credit cards or anything. I think it's a name and an email address so we can spam you afterwards, but you can just unsubscribe. But no, seriously, it's really cool. I wouldn't work for them if it wasn't awesome. So, any other questions? Because Olga hasn't started the music yet.
We have 2 minutes. No.
We have 2 minutes? We have 2 minutes.
No. You don't have 2 minutes.
I don't. You're saying there's 2 minutes till
2 minutes till the next
So Phil has to do his thing. All right. If you want to talk to me, I'm here all day. But thank you very much for my weird experiment of choose your own adventure in the cloud. And I hope to see you throughout the day. Thank you.